Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Grow Yourself from the Inside Out. I'm your host, Kevin McNulty, and I have to start this podcast, and really I could start all of them in such a way to say that it's such a joy and really a privilege to have conversations with such interesting and delightful and wise people. And I got to say that this podcast is no exception. Well, it is kind of an exception to the degree that she brings this incredibly beautiful story about her and her mom. And in fact, as I think I have promoted up to this point, that this is a special belated Mother's Day podcast. So my guest is Dr. Katie Russell Newland, and she wrote a book, a very unique book, I would say, an amazing book called A Season with Mom, Love, Lost, and the Ultimate Baseball Adventure. And so Katie beautifully shares her inspiring story and wisdom about the brevity of life and about the clarity that comes from love and loss and adventure. And I think you're just going to really enjoy this as much as I enjoyed interviewing her or having this conversation. So I'll introduce her, and then you will see a very short clip of a longer documentary that will tell you quite a bit, and then into the interview itself. So Katie Russell is an Austin, Texas-based writer with a PhD in language and literacy from the University of Texas at Austin. Katie's debut book, A Season with Mom, Love, Loss, and the Ultimate Baseball Adventure, tells the story of her journey to visit all 30 Major League Baseball parks in a single season to fulfill her late mother's dream. Then in 2012, Katie survived a double diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma and melanoma. Since then, she has turned her insatiable appetite for learning towards cancer and related health topics. In 2018, she completed a year-long program to become a certified integrative nutrition coach. So Katie is a sports and games fanatic who loves to travel and is now on a mission to see every major sporting events finals. When she's not watching sports or her favorite teams play, such as Chicago Cubs, New Orleans Saints, and the Texas Longhorns, she can be found at a music festival, hosting a board game at night, cooking a healthy meal, or playing pickleball. So welcome, Dr. Katie Russell Newland.
Sort of went in search for my mom, and I found myself. And I think that has been the biggest gift of all.
Katie, goodness, thank you so much for being here with me and us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I have a lot of guests, that this podcast has only been really going for about 6 months now, and I've had a lot of really good guests. But I'll tell you, you're the one guest that I could say, even after watching that documentary there, that I couldn't decide, even as I was watching it just now, whether I should, laugh or cry. I mean, there was just both of these feelings coming together. So again, it's such a privilege to have you here and to share your book and your life with us, that I'll say this several times throughout this interview, that I just highly, highly recommend that everybody read this book, because it's about, well, you say it's about baseball and about your mom, and I say it's about so much more than that. So Katie, thank you again for being here. And first of all, let me just ask you, who is Katie Newland?
Well, I think if you read A Season with Mom, you'll find out that, like all human beings, Katie Newland is a complex person who loves life and loves people. And I think I cultivated my love of life and people from my mom, which is what a lot of the book is about.
Yes, and you say that very early on, that you went to look for your I think, find out who you, let's see, you went to find out who your mom was, but found out who you were, something to that effect.
Absolutely. I think when I set out to do the journey of seeing all 30 major league ballparks, it was a dream my mom had actually when I was a kid. We were in Harry Carey's restaurant in Chicago, and our favorite team was the Chicago Cubs. And we were at the restaurant, and she looked at me with these big eyes, as she often did when traveling. And she said, "Let's go see all the ballparks." And a dream was hatched that day. And I knew that I loved baseball because of her, and I knew that I wanted to go, but I didn't quite know what that adventure was going to be until I actually stepped foot in the first ballpark myself. And I think it was everything my mom was trying to teach me my whole life.
Wow. And you expressed that the book is so not just well written, just exquisite storytelling, but all through I guess, the prism of letters. And in so many ways you were raw. You even wrote things that I went, oh, my father just passed. I'm not sure I'd be ready to tell the truth about some of the things that I experienced in him growing up. And then talked a lot about, how you did discover yourself, but discovered your mom as well at the same time. Is extraordinary. Can you just for the audience, just sort of, because I know you've spoken about this a million times, but just tell us sort of the story about how you arrived at your book. Would you do that?
Absolutely. When I did the journey, I had no plan, which most of my life I had planned out, which has served me well in getting a PhD and other things in life, but hasn't served me in some ways in letting things just come as they are. And so when I stepped foot in the first ballpark, it was the first time that I had let go of, an outcome or a plan. I just knew I was called to do it. And so I had no intention when I did the journey of writing a book. I didn't have any idea that I'd get to throw out the first pitch at Wrigley Field at the end. None of it was forecasted by me. I'm certain it was forecasted by somebody else or the universe, but certainly not by me. And so the book came about after the journey, and after I had had time to sort of sit with it and the experience. And it kept coming up. People would write to me and ask me if I thought about writing a book or, sharing my story. And if I'd learned anything from the journey, it was to listen to the voices around me. And I decided, what, this is something that keeps coming back up. I should give it a try. And in fact, I didn't even know if I was capable of writing a book. I had been in academia and had done a lot of academic writing, but I certainly had never written a memoir or a novel. And when I first started with the idea, I thought, do I need a ghostwriter? Do I need, do I need help with this? And I bought a book on how to write a proposal to get an agent, and just took about 6 months, wrote the proposal, and was lucky enough to have resources here in Austin called the Writers League of Texas, where I met a phenomenal agent who then, goes out and shops the book. And the book became a reality because I just listened to what the universe was saying. And I had no idea when I did the journey that I would actually write it. And in some ways, it was a second journey for me.
Yes. And, and part of the theme that I read in the book was this whole idea of letting go. And you just spoke of it just again. Of course, this podcast is called Grow Yourself from the Inside Out. And I would love to hear what you say to others about just this concept of letting go, and letting the universe or God or however one perceives that to act in your life. I don't, there's a lot of different ways I could put that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, about just letting go of, you mentioned it a couple of times, letting go of the outcomes, the expectations.
Absolutely. In order to grow for myself, I needed to learn to let go. And I needed to learn to let go of perfection. I needed to let go of my own plans or control of situations. We all know that that's not, that's a facade. We don't
Yeah.
control things. And I really needed to learn how to do that. My mom had been trying to get me to do it through most of my life. She would say to me, just be Katie, or just let go. And I never really quite understood what she meant by it until I went on the baseball journey. And for me, letting go was about getting still. I think when we get still, we can hear what the universe or God or whoever is speaking to us, where we can actually hear what the universe is saying. I also think it gives us the opportunity to hear our own voice.
Mm.
And it's when we listen to our own voice and we get still that we hear what it is that we really want out of life, or what our dharma is, or what we're meant to do on this earth, and how we're supposed to give back. So I think in large part, my mom was trying to teach me that for most of my life. It drove me crazy until I stepped into America's ballparks and realized, oh, when I just sit here and I'm letting go of expectation, when I let go of what I think this experience is going to be, and I'm in the moment, I'm present, and I'm with the people around me, and that's when the magic happens.
Very interesting. And when you talk about the magic, and you talk about whether you actually use those words or not, throughout the book, you talk about, and I can now only assume in hearing you that that some aspect of this is because you are letting go, that you went out to just let this be what it was. I did read where you did not confirm or deny that you created a few spreadsheets along the way. Because that's your way, isn't it?
Yeah,
Sort of more. But
certainly.
that in letting go, that's when you started to see things too. You started to see your mother and the wisdom and your life and the things she told you. I mean, just through and through. I mean, every chapter expressed some concept of that. Yes, that you let go, and therefore you begin to see life as it is. Is that the way to say it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the strongest themes that comes out is when I let go of who I thought my mom was, and
Mm,
I was able to see all the good in her. And I mean, we all know that parent-child relationships are complicated
yeah.
and they're complex. And as parents, we do a lot of good for our kids, and there's sometimes we do a lot of harm, not intentional, but we're human, right? We're not
Yeah.
perfect. And I think when I let go of who I thought she was, and saw her through the lens of baseball, and saw her, baseball is a game of perpetual second chances, right? It's an imperfect game. We can
Mhm.
strike out a lot and still be a Hall of Famer. And I think it was a reminder to me that the things that she did in her life and the things that impacted me in my life, I saw them from a different angle. And that was only possible because I got still and because I let go of any expectation of who I thought my mom was.
Wow. And and that's of course a lesson for all of us. I can certainly speak for myself, and I'm a personal development coach, so I have these conversations with others, and I encourage people to let go of these sorts of things too. But in my own life, I struggle too. I mean, let's not. Yeah, I'm
Absolutely.
not trying to fake anybody out here.
I struggle
And
today for sure with that still.
yeah, and still, because it's more, it could be, it's just perhaps your nature, right?
Yeah, and I think it's like anything in life, right? You have to practice it, and
Yeah.
you have to work at it, and we're all a work in progress, and we're all learning as we go, and so yeah, we're incomplete, right?
Incomplete. That's right. No, that's exactly right. And perhaps that is part of or maybe that is one of the main journeys in life you know, continuing to improve and grow as people, as human beings. Letting go is one of the hardest things, letting go of how we judge people, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
Letting go of judgment is a big one.
I want to kind of go back to this, and I do want to give a shout out to Teresa Clark for introducing us, and she's your cousin, right? Of in some
Mhm. Yeah,
or something?
my brother's wife
Okay,
is related to Teresa, and she's just
I
been
see.
so lovely and so supportive of
She is.
my story and my journey, and I'm grateful to know her.
I can imagine, and she is a beautiful person. She's actually, I know Teresa. I've known her for quite some time, but she's really very close to my sister. They're like sisters, yeah. So
Oh,
that's really how I know her. And actually, it wasn't until a couple of months ago or so that I realized she was in Florida. I thought she was still up in Bowling Green. So, in any event, well, listen. So again, I kind of want to go back to this idea, and I wrote some things down that as I was going along, that I started to think about what this story is about, or what the stories or the book is about. And here are some of the things that I wrote. And I would love for you to comment on this, Katie, whether it comes directly from what you learned from your mom, or from the writing, or from your travels, or from what you think now. So I wrote down that this is a story about being fearless.
yeah, absolutely. My mom was fearless. I was not most of my life. I was had a lot of anxiety as I was growing up. I
Mm,
She would put herself out into the world. I retreated. Who knows whether it was in opposition to her or just how I was wired. I had a lot of fear in life, most of my life. I think a fear of, naturally, like we all have, of death. And I think my mom showed me how to live fearlessly. And in particular, when she got cancer, because in the face of something that was so scary, she just continued to, show joy. Not that it was easy, or not that she didn't
sure.
show the struggles, or not that she didn't have tears, but she showed me how to find joy in the moments that you wouldn't expect to find joy. And it really helped me in my cancer treatment when I got cancer to find small ways to have fun in moments that were not so fun. Whether it was, I painted my nails a crazy color for each chemo treatment, or I would play a sort of a sports playlist to pump me up for radiation. I got that from my mom. And it was a way for me to take that fear and validate it and accept it, because it's scary. It's scary when you face death.
Yeah.
But
Goodness.
to then find the joy even in those moments, because we can find joy when things are going easy, right? It's easy to be happy and to find joy, but when it's in the hard moments, if you can just find that piece of joy, I think it shifts everything. And my mom was so good at that. And I didn't know how to do that until really my own cancer treatment and
Wow.
her.
Yes, and I imagine that not only the experience of watching her gracefully handle cancer,
Mhm.
but also then, you know, what we don't know is embedded in us from our parents, as you were growing up.
Yeah.
These things came alive. And so then the second thing I said was, this story is about being adventurous, and this kind of fits really into the being fearless as well, right? Your
Yeah.
mother was adventurous.
She certainly was. She did not shy away from adventure. In fact, when they gave her sort of a limited time frame regarding her cancer and her life, she flew to China with her friends. They wanted to see it. I mean, that would not have been my response, but that's what she did in the face of death. And it's such a good reminder to me about when things are scary to take off on an adventure, because being adventurous and going on adventures, whether it's traveling, that's easy to be
Right.
adventurous, right?
Sure.
She found adventure even like close to home. She would make fun adventures with her friends, and she did a happy hour in the back of a truck, like crazy, just fun
That's
adventures,
crazy.
things like that. And yeah, she always just was full of them, and she drew people to her because of that. And I think it's in adventure where we learn and we grow, because we're in connection with others and with different cultures and different experiences. And Absolutely.
But I think everyone ought to know this. First of all, they should go read the book and learn for themselves. But it's not like your mother was just like this free spirit that just did everything that she wanted all day long. I mean, first of all, she raised 6 kids, right? Let's start with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And owned and managed 2 restaurants.
Exactly. And in some ways, the restaurant business was an adventure. She was
Okay.
not a classically trained chef. She just had a passion for cooking. She read cookbooks voraciously. I can see her right now actually on the back porch, like clipping recipes and putting them in binders. And she just had a dream that she wanted to open a restaurant. She wanted to be a chef, and she did it. I don't know many people, especially back in that day, because female chefs were not necessarily, prominent.
Right.
And
Yes.
in the city of New Orleans, where restaurants and culinary is, there's a lot of it. She just decided she was going to do it. And in some ways, that's the biggest adventure of all, right? Is to go out and do a career at 40, when she had 6 kids. And
And it's a hell of a lot of work from what I understand.
It was.
So, I mean, it's just incredible to hear how, on the one hand, she really seems like a driven woman, but on the other hand, she was also, sort of had this impromptu attitude. Let's go do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
How amazing. I also read, and I wrote this down, but it connects with the first couple about being fearless, that this book is about seeing the opportunity in crisis. And you mentioned about what happened, or her attitude, and then what you all did, I suppose, after Katrina. So you were in Katrina, correct? Tell
Yeah.
us just a little bit about that and what your mother ended up doing with you all.
So when Hurricane Katrina hit, my family, we grew up in New Orleans, right smack in the city. And by that time, all 6 of us had moved away. And so they had moved to what was sort of like a little beach house on the Gulf of Mexico. It was a simple little home there. But they had moved sort of all their stuff over there. And as anyone who remembers Katrina, the eye of the storm really came across the Gulf Coast and Mississippi. And so the eye came across Bay St. Louis past Michigan, which is where our home was. So it totally demolished everything. No sign of anything in the house. And she had gotten out the night before it hit, even though her neighbors had stayed, unfortunately. And so my dad had stayed back home in New Orleans because he was caring for people since he was a physician. And he stayed back, and we didn't hear from him for probably a week or 8 days. We didn't know if he was alive, where he was. It's definitely a scary time for my family and I. And my mom, after it, instead of sort of wallowing in the loss, once we knew my dad was okay, and I picked him up actually on the road on the side of I-10 after about a week. And when she realized that my dad was okay, they took it as an opportunity to go travel and see each one of their kids. And I remember, and I think back to how it was one of the most special times in my life with my parents, because I was older, I was able to appreciate them more. And because they were stripped down, right? They had no things anymore.
Goodness gracious.
Nothing. My dad's identity most of his life had been helping and taking care of others, which of course he did in Katrina and helping people at the hospital. But once they stepped away, because the New Orleans really had no infrastructure, so he didn't have a job for several months. And once they stripped things away and the identity away of like, what do I do in life? And we're just present with each one of their kids. It was such a gift. It was such a gift to be with them.
Yeah.
And to experience them and to have conversations with them. And I look back on it as a absolutely horrific time in our lives to lose our childhood home and all our things, but also like what an opportunity to get to spend with my parents an extended time.
Yes. And I'm just sitting here, I'm thinking, what must it been like to have these conversations with your parents when literally just days before they lost everything, and I do mean everything. And what, how can they even function,
Yeah.
with the thought of so much loss, really?
Yeah, I think my parents were such a good model for me about,
Yeah,
not placing value on material
material
things.
things.
And my dad, deeply religious, deeply spiritual human being. And I think for him, when I picked him up on the side of the road, all he had was the suit that he had on, which he'd worn
Goodness.
for 7 days. He'd taken off his jacket when he was helping people, but there was no electricity, no power. He had one left can of like Campbell's soup and an opener and a little bag, grocery bag, on the side of the I-10 because a nurse had taken him on the way to Houston. And I came from San Antonio and picked him up in Houston, and he never complained. He never, complained about losing things or
Yeah.
trauma he experienced. He stayed till the last person was helicoptered out on the roof from the hospital. And I remember him. I remember getting a call. I was actually at the Alamo with my brother and his family who had evacuated with me, and I remember getting a call from a doctor saying, your dad wanted me to call you. He doesn't have any cell service because he had left New Orleans, this doctor, and he said he's not leaving though. He's not leaving these patients, which was so my dad, right? Like duty and honor, but he wanted to also make sure we knew he was okay. And so to have those conversations with him about what transpired and what transcended during that time, and to really learn about who they were at the core, because it was a raw time, really was a gift.
I'm thinking about, both of your parents, and the other thing that I didn't write here, but I think about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. You're familiar, you probably read it.
Yeah.
And the powerful lessons that came out of that about, and I won't tell the story, but another book I highly recommend, that he was, of course, an Austrian psychologist in Auschwitz. His family and friends were there, but he was a notable psychologist at the time in World War II. So this book expressed his point of view from both a personal experience and as a professional. And he essentially said, one of the big takeaways from the book was that in any circumstance, your last human freedom is your ability to choose your attitude in any given situation, right? And it sounds like both of your parents, sounds like they epitomized this idea of being in control. I mean, how do you not be in complete freak out mode when you have cancer and know that your death is imminent?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's such a great analogy and a great point. It really is. What do we do when we're faced? We always have a choice, right? We don't have a choice sometimes in things
Yes.
that happen to us, like cancer or Katrina, but we always have a choice in how we respond. And they really helped me learn how to cultivate, how to sit down and think through what my choices are. And
Interesting.
I think that was so important for me during cancer, because I could choose to wallow in it, which is fine, and and those who do, like, yes,
Justifiably, yes,
exactly. Like, and I could have done that, and I'm sure there were days that I did, and then I could choose to, see it as an opportunity to grow I spent a lot of my time during chemo reading and learning about health and wellness, and choosing to find a way to make my cancer make sense. So this is presented to me. It's very unfortunate. I had to sort of pause my life, but what is the message? What am I supposed to learn from this experience? How am I going to grow from this crisis? And what I've learned and how to grow in my life is I turn to others and their wisdom and their experiences to help me learn. So I was voracious about reading.
Wow.
And reading others' experiences during cancer treatment, and reading about health and wellness, because I knew I couldn't continue to do the things in my life I had always done, because I would land in the same place, right? And it wasn't fun to go through cancer treatment, to say the least. So what am I going to do to change my life so that I don't end up here again? Yes.
Wow. So maybe one of the first things to consider, to understand, and, I never would venture to say that I know what that's like to go through cancer itself. But maybe one of the first things that, for those listening, maybe even those struggling deeply with whether it's a health issue or whatever the case, or whatever the case, that you start with the premise that almost the question, if I'm speaking to myself, Kevin, you do realize that you can choose your attitude, as difficult as this is. Right? Just get into that place of recognizing, as shitty as a situation is, you still can choose your attitude. That might not be easy, but you can.
Absolutely. 100%. It's like you said, it's sometimes not as easy as doing it, but once you learn that you can, and also allowing yourself to be in the anger or the pity or the wherever you need to be, and then allowing and validating it, and then making the choice to have a different attitude or a different, it's life-changing, really.
Yes.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And if you can conquer it during that time, it seems to me that it just must give you a level of security that you've never known, because as Frankel said, that, in any given situation, as hard as it may be, you can choose your attitude. Wow. I mean, this is so. You also said, I said that this book is about bunting. It is, and as soon as you started to talk about this whole idea of bunting, and I want you to comment, if you don't mind, about it, I immediately got it. Yeah, I mean, just that the metaphor was just right there. If you will, the analogy. Talk about this thing about bunting that you mentioned in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So if
and we're talking about softball, baseball, whatever. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a baseball fan, or maybe you're not, you probably have heard of the bunt. And I think most baseball players, when they step up to bat, I think they, want to. The goal is to hit the ball out of the ballpark, right? I want to step in there and I want to hit the ball as hard as I can. Exactly. Like, that's how we win the game.
Yes.
In reality, I think it's the bunt, the small hit that moves the runner into scoring position, that then scores the runner. In the end, sometimes is how you win the game. And I think that's so analogous with life, that I think of a bunt as sort of this small act of belief, right? This small act of belief that my coach has asked me to not swing away, put the ball in play, to move the runner. You're trusting your coach, right? And I think in life, the bunt, or the small act of belief, that you can do something. Or for me, for example, taking that first step into the first ballpark. It was that small act of belief for me that I knew I was called to do something, and that I didn't know what it would become. And it seems like sometimes our dreams, or our, if we want to do something different with our lives, or we want to grow, that it needs to be the home run, or it needs to be this big hit. Actually, it's a series of small acts of belief, or it's these series of bunts, right, that actually get us to the end goal. And I mean, I think about it with my story. Like, it was the belief of stepping foot into the ballpark, and then it was okay, I'm going to continue to do this. And there were times during the journey I did think about, well, should I be doing this right now? I think I was in Minnesota, and I got sick. And I was sick for the very first time since my cancer treatment. And it was really scary for me. And it was really, I could feel fear creeping in. And I thought, man, maybe this is not good for my health, to be flying on planes and not working out as much, or not eating as healthy. And I had to really think about, is this the right move for me? And so I did continue on, and I did believe that I should keep going. And then it led to the book, right? Like this act of belief that okay, maybe I can write a book. I don't know. I'm gonna try. And then now, the book's been optioned for a movie, and I certainly didn't go on
Wow.
this journey to have a movie produced or to write a book or any of that. But it were these small acts of belief along the way that I got still enough to hear. And, it was the little bunt that actually put me here on your podcast today, right? I would never have met you if I hadn't taken those small steps.
Wow. And the other thing that I wrote, and you're even to some degree talking about this now, that this book is about connecting to something larger than yourself. And in some way, I guess I hear you saying that that's part of what the bunt is, that there's a greater good, there's a sacrifice to be had for the team win, correct? So you can go
Yeah,
after your home run. I mean, okay, so that helps the team win. No question about it. But that, to your point, you have faith in those who understand the greater good and know, and you take that step of faith, and bigger things happen.
gosh, it's the perfect way to put it. Absolutely. Yes.
Wow. Um, so the story is about seeing your mother in others and in other circumstances. I was just blown away about the way that you drew, you found these understandings about who she was or who you were, not just in like, oh, my mother used to tell me this, but you talked about the juggler, and I am curious about Pass the Pig. What is
Pass the pigs. It's a little game. There are these little miniature pigs, and you roll them like dice, and the way
okay?
they land end up, you score points based on it. So it fits in your pocket. You can bring it out anywhere. My mom loved games, as do I, because she felt like games united people.
Yes,
And so, yes, Pass the Pigs. So if you
that's
haven't heard of it, you should pick up a pair.
I'm gonna look it up. But you also talked about the juggler and what you learned about your mom, or your connection to your mom or something. Can you just share that?
Yeah, I was in Cincinnati, I believe. Yes. And it was before the game. And, like at many baseball games, they have entertainment outside the ballpark.
Mhm.
And there was this juggler, and he dropped his baton. And I was actually taking a photograph, filming him at the time. And my heart just sank. And I felt so awful for him. And I sat there sort of like, oh no. And he looked right up and was just put out his hands and was like,
Whatever,
oh well, that
Oh, well.
happens. And here I was like, oh no, this poor
Yes.
guy. And at the end of the day, I think if we can look at the times we fail in life as, oh well, what do I have to learn from it? I think it would serve us well. And I know it's something I'm trying to cultivate more as a
Yeah.
recovering perfectionist, is
Yeah.
how to let the mistakes actually help. Those are the times I grow the most, right?
Yeah.
When things are going
Yes.
easy and things are making sense and I'm on the right track, great. But it's the moment where I drop the baton, like the juggler, where those are the opportunities for growth. And if we can see them as that, then the sting or the pain of the mistake or doesn't hurt so much, I think.
Yes, and I don't hear you saying, just shrug your shoulders to things that, like, it doesn't matter, but shrug your shoulders um, to this idea that this mistake is going to crush you, or that it somehow is your identity. But to your point, it's the old thing, bend over, pick it up, and keep going. You
Absolutely.
see, that's
Yes.
such a beautiful thing. Um, this is about, being filled with hope instead of fear. This book is about, and it sounds like your mother just epitomized that and shared that with you as you went through cancer. May I just ask, if it's okay, would you, because I have friends and a dear niece who is struggling with cancer right now, and has gone to Houston, I think, where you went to be treated as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot here, Katie, but can you share just your words of wisdom about going through those sorts of things, and I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to hear that. I think you'll find in life, I don't know that anyone hasn't been touched by cancer. It's
Yeah.
sort of a universal thing, whether you're a caretaker or you're a patient or you're a friend. I think we're all impacted by cancer. And my hope is that this book or this story, whether it's, as you said, your niece,
Yes.
or
Julie.
anyone out there who might be listening, I hope that people realize no matter how far down you are, just like in baseball, it's never too late to stage a rally or a comeback. When you're
Wow.
in the deepest part of cancer treatment or you're losing hope,
Yeah.
um, I hope this story reminds people that you might be going through something not so great right now. So was I. And somehow beautiful things came afterwards, and to hold on to that hope, and to hold on to the joy in moments that seem the scariest. I think that would be what I would share from my own personal
Oh,
experience that helped me.
such a beautiful, really thought. And I say that sincerely that, hope is such an important aspect. And I suppose that perhaps you and your mother and others that maybe like grief, you have to get over the shock first. And there's there's some logistical things and there's some practical things that are going to be hard. There's the physical part of chemo and all those sorts of things. And I would not dare to minimize the what comes with that. But your point is to hang on to hope, whatever that hope is, because um, and maybe you could say like your mother who didn't survive, um, you know, uh, can we say she bunted? I mean, she she showed you grace and love and all these other sorts of things because she saw that as the bigger picture to pass on to her children and those around her. But the other part is, I think, if I hear you correctly, is that when you are in these circumstances, it takes you to a place, you're stripped of everything, perhaps like your dad showed up. You're stripped of everything. And so your mind has to go to what is really, truly important here. You have no choice, right?
Mhm.
And some don't go there, but it is, to your point, where you will learn about life in ways that others never will.
Absolutely. When you're going through it, it's hard to see any positives, certainly. But, if you're fortunate enough, like I was, to get through it, you start to learn about the little gifts that were given during the experience, which is, who am I? When you strip
Yeah.
all that away, like, who am I? Like, I'm not working right now because I can't physically. Like, I'm, not getting to see friends really because I can't go out because my immune system is so low, I might get an infection.
Wow.
So who am I? And what do I want in this life? And what am I grateful for? And how can I make a difference? Like, those were the four things that I kept coming back to when I was by myself going through that treatment, and when I was in the baseball parks, frankly, and sitting there in stillness, whether it's baseball parks or whether it's cancer treatment. I think when we get still and strip ourselves of all the things that we think are who we are,
That's right.
but in
That's right.
actuality are just, our way of being in the world, I think we get clarity in a way that I don't know it's easy to achieve
Wow.
without the stillness and without the opportunity.
And I imagine you find things like, let's just say you have financial problems, even serious financial problems, and suddenly you're faced with your mortality. Those financial problems probably mean zero. And on a day earlier, you were stressed and sunk in your bed and freaked out because you have financial problems. Not to, financial problems are problems, But when it comes to what you're saying, you're stripped away of everything else. It's meaningless. What means something, probably, I don't know what words you would come to, but I would say maybe first and foremost, love and God. I mean, those, that deeper part of you, and
Yes.
relationships,
Yes.
all of it is.
Absolutely. And I wonder, I've thought a lot about how do we create those opportunities without the crisis?
Yes.
Is it possible?
Yes.
Because
Have you come to a conclusion?
No, I don't have the answer. I'm thinking on it, like, how do
Come on, Dr. Newland.
how do you help convey
Yeah.
things that you have to go through when you're faced with a financial crisis or a health crisis, or
Yes.
how do you create something where everyone can experience the opportunity without the pain? But I guess maybe you have to have the pain in order to come through. I don't know. That's
a tough one. That's a great question. We should all ponder, and maybe you're right, but the other side of that, of course, is listening to people like you who have been to, to the depths of pain, I mean, when you're facing mortality, I don't know of anything else that could potentially be darker and take you to a place that we can't understand, and those sorts of things. This story is about LMA. You mentioned just a moment ago about, you came to this, who am I? Who am I? And I have this question that I ask people in workshops all the time. And it's two questions, and I'm typically asking the person who's listening or the audience to answer the second question. The first is just a preparatory to the second. And so I want to ask you this in relation to Ella May, and you'll tell us about who she is in just a second. Mm-hmm. So here's the question or questions. So Katie Newland, who are you? But more importantly, why do you see the world the way that you do? Mm-hmm. And speak about Ella May and how she has shaped your.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us who she is first. So that
as I mentioned, or you mentioned, we talked about my mom was a full-time chef, restaurant owner, 6 kids. My dad worked full-time as a physician. So naturally, my brothers and sisters helped out a lot, but they were able to, we were fortunate enough to be able to have some help around the house. And Ella May arrived at the house when I was 1 month old. So she pretty much raised me because she was there till I was about 12, 13. Wow. And she, in many ways, I feel like was my mom because my mom was busy. And, part of this book talks a lot about how our special bond was baseball, and that's how we connected because my mom loved sports and we had that. And I feel so grateful for that. And in many ways, my mom and I weren't connected because she wasn't present. And Ella May and I connected in a way that you can only connect with someone when they're present 24/7 almost, or a large part of the day. And so I think that when I ask myself, who am I? The answer that just comes to me always is love. And I think Ella May showed me what unconditional love was.
Wow.
And I think, she helped me to realize that you don't have to be, someone's biological mom, or you don't have to, that you can love someone deeply and wholeheartedly just because they care and because they're important to you. And I deeply love Ella May. We talk once a week. She follows me on Instagram now, and she's much older, and I love it. It just, makes my heart flutter every time I see a message from her. But,
I can imagine.
She really raised me, and the book talks about it. And I think, my mom would probably be a little bit hurt by that, even though I think deep down she knew that herself. And in some ways, Ella May was the best person to raise me. I think when you have 6 kids and you have your own dreams, it's hard to navigate tapping into and cultivating both of those. So that's who Ella May was. And I think that's what she gave me, which is love, unconditional love.
That's amazing. And I think what's interesting about it, and you didn't take it for granted because you talked about later when you went to visit her after some time, she had been away from you for many years,
Yeah.
and you wondered how she thought of you.
Yeah.
I think you said that you wondered if she considered you family like you considered her.
Yes, definitely. Because, obviously when you have babysitters or people who help
Yeah,
your family out, you realize that they were employed, right? Like they obviously were
right.
paid to do that. And did she think of me in the way that I thought of her? And
Yeah,
I really thought of her as family and my mom.
yeah.
And when I arrived at her house, I mainly really wanted to know she was okay because she spent a
Sure.
large part of her life making sure I was okay.
Goodness
And
gracious.
I wanted to know, like, is she okay? And can, in some ways, she took care of me and now I'm taking care of her. And that's how life works, right? Like,
Yes.
and so when I arrived at her house and we went in, and I could see in her house certain things from our house that my dad had gifted her, and on her dresser were her pictures of family members, and then there was this picture of our family,
Mm,
and it was old, and you could kind of almost barely make out the faces because it was, photographs back then weren't as high quality, and so it's kind of yellow and stained, and she clearly had it there her whole life, with
wow.
her, and it validated for me that I had considered her family and that she had considered me or my family too.
And I think you straight up asked her, right?
I did.
Do you, I don't remember, what
Yeah.
do you think of, do you consider me family or something like this,
Yeah.
whatever,
And I wanted to
which is
know,
beautiful, man.
yeah. And I wanted to know if we loved her as much as she loved me. Like, and that it was reciprocal because it felt that way, but I wanted to make sure she knew how much I unconditionally loved her.
Yeah. But to your point, and I did take note of something that really, yeah, I mean, just really resonated with me. I'm not sure why I didn't have this experience, but that she would, greet you home from school with your rabbi. I guess that your rabbit.
Yep, my stuffed rabbit I carried with me everywhere till a
Oh,
very old age.
is that right?
Yes.
You said, and a grilled cheese sandwich, and
Mhm.
then you said a warm blanket,
Yes.
and that she would position you in front of the television with those three things.
Yep.
And, you know, and of course, that's just pure love. I mean, forget the rabbit, the warm blanket, and the grilled cheese, but the gesture that you felt all your life from this sounds like this beautiful human being.
Yeah, I always felt wrapped in a warm blanket, that was
Yes,
figuratively and literally my whole
right.
life, and what a gift for me to have that person in my life.
And so when I ask who are you and why do you see the world the way that you do, clearly Ella May, shared with you a different kind of love. And of course, it doesn't take anything from your mother. But as you said, that this is a very special relationship. That didn't have to be. We would expect our parents to love us, correct? But
Right.
you don't have to. I think maybe to your point, you don't think that others have to love you, and so then they choose to love you and
Yeah,
show you these sorts of things.
absolutely.
Um,
One little thing that I find so interesting is that my sister's kids, she has her responses on like social media or in conversations with her are always about my sister's kids.
wow.
She loves my sister's kids in the same way that she loved us. And to see that it's just a further validation of what you were saying, and the
It's
love I
beautiful,
was
man.
given.
So, poor dad. I, as I was reading through this, I said to myself, if my daughters wrote this, I raised two daughters. I have a son, but also two daughters. And I thought to myself, this is pretty much how this would roll in my life too, because my wife is a beautiful mother and a beautiful human being. We've been married just hit 35 years.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you so much. And, and I think my daughters have this kind of this beautiful relationship as even though maybe you didn't, and perhaps you could say the same. My girls are now 24 and 27, and, growing up, I suppose they, like every other kid, at some point hated their parents or whatever, or just thought you're not there for me, or all these other sorts of things, But I think if they wrote a book, it would be totally about, just really this beautiful mother that they have. And dad, my son was from a previous marriage, so we didn't all grow up in the same family. So in raising our daughters, though, I always felt like it was, me against the estrogen. I mean, I remember times that maybe one daughter would be, like kind of upset at me, and I was like, well, what's wrong? And I realized that my wife was mad at me, so therefore she's mad at me. But having said that, certainly I would just love to hear a little bit about your dad. So he was a physician.
Yeah. And, I think I could, my dad was such a complex, kind, thoughtful human being that I could write a whole book about him as well. I just happened to write the book about my mom, but I could certainly write a book about my dad. He's the most thoughtful, kind human being I've ever met in my whole life. He's steady Eddie, easygoing. When my mom created anxiety for me, he lowered it. He was always, you could always count on him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He somehow, could fit a circle in a square or a square in a circle.
Yeah. Yes.
Just was like smart about life. He could fix anything. He could do anything. And so I always thought of him as this like hero and like untouchable. And
wow.
As you get older, you realize your parents have faults and they're not perfect. And he certainly chose to he felt called by God and by, he just felt called to serve in the capacity of a physician, and he put his patients first, always, first and foremost. He, Christmas Day, I can remember many times where I would look around and be like, "Where's Dad?" And he was making a house call because someone was sick. And in some ways, I felt a little bit neglected, obviously, and I talk about it in the book. And in other ways, what a model to grow up around, to see someone who sacrificed his entire life to serve others. And I mean that literally in the grandest sense.
Wow.
Every single day, he put people in front of him. And his own needs. And it's something I negotiate in the book is like, is that healthy, right? To always not pay attention to your own needs. So it was his strength and also maybe his downfall in some ways.
Yeah.
But was an amazing man. He happened to he passed away in August, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
And, I'm just grateful because he went peacefully. He was in a nursing home and they said he was just in his chair, and he just went to sleep. And for me, that was such a gift in that what he did in life is he put people at ease. He made people feel okay in times when they weren't okay. And he took people's pain away. And so for me, and the thing that I prayed about all the time was, can you just let him go peacefully? Can you take him peacefully? He spent his whole life putting people at peace, and he had started to lose his mind, which was hard for someone who was so talented.
Goodness gracious, yes.
His identity was stripped, and he actually was in the nursing home where he was the doctor for 40 years, the head of the nursing home. And so they knew him. They were negotiating his loss too. And, I just kept praying, like, please let him go without pain and peacefully. What we want for all of our the people in our lives and our family and our friends. And he did. And, as sad as I was, I felt so relieved that, he was able to go out on his own terms and peacefully. And so it was challenging, but also was nice because his home really was the nursing home more than our home. So we felt
Amazing.
like he was going home at the end of the day.
Gosh, yes, that's, twice. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
amazing. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I'm so sorry, but what a beautiful uh, words about him. So just a couple of other very quick things. You know, I don't know. Okay. First of all, I want to, just for the audience, because it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the way through, that I don't know if, I wouldn't say that I didn't pick up on it, but that I suddenly went, whoa. And that was the titles of each of your chapters. That is mind blowing. And I'm going to run through them very quickly.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that you'd want to say about any of them, because that tells a story in and of itself. I mean, it's just a beautiful way to, I mean, it's just brilliant, really, a way to do this. And then I have one more question for you. So, starting with chapter 1 is begin. Chapter 2 is be present. 3 is be the light. 4 is believe. 5 is be generous. Then be hopeful. Be family. Be long. Be understanding. Be resilient. Be communicative. Be compassionate. Be adventurous, which I loved, by the way. Be mindful. Be ready. Be happy. Become. Behind the scenes. Be strong. Be calm. Be alert. Be reflective. Be grateful. Be forgiving. Be balanced. I loved that. Be still. Be loyal. Be open. Be in the moment. And chapter 30 is be. I mean, that in and of itself is just like a book. It just, there's, I love to ask people, particularly if you've written a book or have done something, interesting, to tell us about, what are the takeaways. But I mean, that was, there's 30 of them right there. That just resonates so beautifully. And then you went on to say, for extra innings, be patient, be loved, be flexible, just so beautiful. So the last question I guess I have for you, Katie, is, you mentioned that your mother just was so interested in other people's lives. But then you said something really interesting. You said, but more, and correct me, if I don't get this completely right, but more, she was just interested in the chapter that they were in. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Just a tad about that, and then I have a question for you.
Yeah. My mom loved people.
Mm.
She loved meeting people, and she always believed that when she crossed paths with people, that there was something bigger and something meant to be by it. And so she was a great listener. Her friends actually, when I met with them after the journey, said that, like, she was such a good listener. And I think she really enjoyed learning about people's lives and what chapter they happened to be in when she crossed paths with them. And I think that we grow, right, when we learn about other stories. And she was so curious about other people's lives and other people's stories. And I didn't really realize it because it kind of annoyed me when I was little. Like, she'd stop and talk to everyone, and she would, but now I'm like, oh, that's what you were doing,
Wow.
and that's what I did in the baseball ballparks. I stopped and listened to who did I happen to be sitting around at the baseball ballpark. You know what? It might not have just been by chance that they were sitting next to me after I listened and learned their stories, because at the end of the day, we realize when we listen to others that we're not so different. We might look different. We might have different political beliefs or different religious beliefs. But at the end of the day, we're just like everyone else. And when we can see that and we can believe that, I think that we let go of judgment, and we open up to what the people in front of us have to share and the lessons they have for us.
And this really epitomizes much of what you learned from your mother and your father, and this idea of acceptance of circumstances and of people around you, that, and of being open, that you just don't know until you just, begin the conversation with someone, and suddenly, to your point, you realize either things about yourself or about them. You realize we all have common struggles in life, and all these other sorts of things. So then, Katie, what about your chapter right now? What chapter are you in your life?
Thanks for asking that. Well, I am actually trying to cultivate my career as a children's book author. It's something I've always wanted to do. I've obviously been around picture books and kids my whole life as a teacher, but it's something I've always wanted to do. So I just completed my manuscript of A Season with Mom, which is actually a fictionalized retelling of a little girl and her mom who go to see all 30 ballparks. And so that's exciting. I'm working on that. And we just adopted a dog, Charlie, who's sitting to my right now. He's the most lovely dog. The only thing is that he snores. And I was so afraid he was going to start snoring. But he has to be by me. So I was like, do I leave him here? Do I not?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, bring him on, man.
The conversation was interesting because I only heard one snore.
Okay, outstanding. Well, listen, we have a dog, Isabel, that I will put up against any snoring dog. And I'm not kidding you either. Well, Katie, where can people find you? Where can they, your book is obviously on Amazon, but where can people reach out to you, whether it's looking for you to come? I assume that you're doing speaking as well. And how can people get in touch with you? And of course, everything that you say, I will put in the show notes, but I want to hear from you.
Perfect. Yeah, probably the best way is just KatieRussellNewland.com, because then you can email me through that, or follow me through Instagram, or that's pretty much where I share a lot about the book and what I'm doing is through Instagram or the website.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So, and again, I can't, this seems like the obvious thing that I should do, and tell people about your book again. I bought the Kindle version of it, and I'll just show people so they can see what it looks like. Let's see here. Here's what it looks like, everybody. But what I really want people to know, that it's truly a beautiful book. I guess I should mention, since I'm a fan, that Peyton Manning wrote the foreword, right? And he was a childhood friend of yours, right? You grew up right across the street or something? And
yeah, we grew up across the street from one another, and we went to the same school for most of our lives, and we were in the same class. So I've known Peyton a long time, and he was super gracious to write the foreword, as he has been super gracious to many people over his lifetime.
That's what I understand. So in any event, I just want to tell those out there, seriously, please go pick up this book and grow and learn and feel joy. And again, I think I told you earlier, I will not confirm or deny that I shed any tears over this book, but I will say that it will bring tears to you, but beautiful tears that make you feel so good. Katie, thank you so much for spending time with me and my audience, and sharing your book and your wisdom. You're just a beautiful person, and thank God, but thank God also for your mother and father, who just raised a beautiful human being.
Oh, thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin. This has just been such a joy to be with you in conversation. Thank you.
Well, the pleasure is completely mine. So I hope to stay in touch with you. And thank you, Teresa, again, I will have to say to her.
Yes.
Okay. God bless.
Thank you.